Bonjour, hi, and welcome back to another episode of Matthew's Always Wrong. Now, I know it's been a while since we last posted. That was because we're doing a little documentary. I had to go to Haiti for a little while. We'll talk about that in one of the upcoming episodes. Big show, very excited for that one. But today, we got to go over a lot of the news we missed over the amount of time I was gone for. A lot of stuff happened. I definitely won't be able to get through all of it today, but, we'll make our way up to it, right? Anyways, so during Easter, now known as Trans Visibility Day, I'm just kidding, but there was this whole thing about where, conservatives and all these people on the right, me including me, I also fell for it. We were all under the impression that Joe Biden essentially canceled Easter and called it, Trans Visibility Day. Here's the truth, okay? Here's the thing. Trans Visibility Day has been a thing since 2009 and is on March 31st every year. It only happened that this year Easter also fell on, March 31st. But I will say, it's very appalling that the president of the United States, the president of a Christian country, he says Happy Trans Day instead of Happy Easter, which is one of the most important religious events for Christians. Well, as Christians, I think they've gotten used to this idea that, they don't matter, right? The left doesn't care about you. The right is essentially the only people who care about you, and that's, a smaller portion of it. You got evangelicals and whatever, but, if you have a country whose entire ideology is essentially based off of what Christianity was, and then you have a president who's a self-proclaimed Christian, as Joe Biden is, and then you have him say something about Trans Visibility Day, which, the Pope just came out again saying that, trans people and all this ideology is not great. It's not great for humanity. And, it's disrespectful to Christians. Imagine if he said, Happy Trans Day on some Muslim holiday or some Jewish holiday. It would be a much bigger thing, but Christians have gotten essentially used to the fact that, maybe that because their religion is the baseline of Western society and Western culture, it's fine that their rights get trampled on a little bit. It's fine because, they're very tolerant. Christianity is one of the most tolerant religion, has been, and that's one of the reasons why there's been such a, the pushback's been able to literally push back Christianity so strong. So, listen, I'm less mad knowing that, this day has been a holiday for a while now, and it's always on March 31st. But I do find it, it's not a great sight to see the president going Happy Trans Day instead of, Happy Easter, right? It's a very, but he'll go Happy Ramadan, right? So, listen, no hate, but that's all I got to say. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit because it did have me. I was under the influence. They got me with that fake news. But I was under the influence that, from my understanding, Joe Biden created this new holiday, which truly would have been outrageous. And he totally could get away with it. It would be the exact same thing as this, essentially. He could totally have gotten away with it. But, so I just want to put that out there. Let's get on to some more important news. I want to talk about Moscow. So Moscow recently had one of its biggest acts of terrorism committed against it. Essentially what happens, you had, 4 men from Tajikistan who go into the city hall, this concert hall called Crocus City Hall, which is in the northern part of Moscow. And this hall, which essentially was having some concert going on, some rock concert, I believe, and there are around, 6,000 people in attendance right now. See, this is more like it was kind of like a mall, essentially, right? So you got these 6,000 people going in watching this thing, and these 4 men run in, start shooting up people with automatic or semi-auto guns, right? And start throwing like Molotov cocktails and shit. So they ended up killing 137 people, injuring over 100 others, including 60 of which are in critical condition. I believe the death count has now gone up by a few, but so they commit this act of terrorism. Then they start fleeing. Russian officials then catch them trying to flee over the Ukrainian border. They ended up catching them, and then they end up doing what good policemen should do, and they start, torturing them a little bit. Like, come on. While they tortured them, a lot of videos came out of, the guys getting beaten. One of the guys got his ears cut off, so you see all the bandages. One of the guys got, 2 rods stuck in him, and they started electrocuting his dick. Which, as they should, in an event of mass terrorism on scales that haven't been seen for a very long time in a country, you need to have police officers, right? Or, state agents, whatever, who are able to, protect the interest of the country. And I support, listen, there's a lot of flack for Russia and about all their invasion stuff, whatever, right? But you know what? I gotta support them. They have police officers, right? Sure, they're destroying a few human rights. They're whatever. They're walking over some human rights. But I think your claim to human rights, or at least basic human rights, is essentially voided when you commit acts of mass terrorism. When you kill 100 people, I think you deserve to be tortured, right? So then it comes out that, firstly, every news media organization instantly calls it. They're like, this was ISIS-K. ISIS also confirmed this. ISIS-K is essentially a faction of ISIS, which operates primarily in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And, it's another Islamist group who wants to bring fundamental Islam towards, other places. But what's very odd about this is that most of the time when ISIS-K, I believe it's every single time ISIS-K commits a mass terror event, it is by suicide bombing. It's not by shooting and running. So, again, we don't exactly know who did what, but here are a few more facts that just came out. So, during the torture sessions, one of the guys who's being tortured goes, he was contacted by someone on Telegram and offered 500,000 rubles in order to commit this act of terror, right? He got half, and then he would receive the other half once the act was done. 500,000 rubles, you know how much that is? Roughly $7,000 in Canadian dollars. $7,000 to kill a bunch of people. Now, how desperate you gotta be, that's right. Then what happened was that he was, dropped off. He was in Russia, and the guns were delivered to him. So he gets the guns, he got the money, he got, everything he needed. Goes up, they shoot this place up, then they start fleeing because they're like, they try to flee to Russia. They get caught. Now, I think just a few days ago, Russia puts out a statement saying that these guys were paid by one of the largest private gas companies in Ukraine, Burisma. Apparently, they were the ones who paid these Tajik militants to commit the act of terror through Telegram. Just listen, it's the Russian state media. Do we know if this is true? We don't know. But I just want to point this out. Just want to put out this extra little tidbit of info. Hunter Biden, as you know, the son of President Joe Biden, was actually on the board of directors of Burisma from 2014 to 2018. Listen, I'm not saying anything. I just want to point that out. It's just interesting that he worked there. Now, is it possible that it is genuinely ISIS-K? It is entirely possible. There are some, issues going on in Russia, especially from, the Christians versus, the Islamists. Is it also possible that a foreign intelligence agency went in? Is it possible that Ukraine went and paid these people? Also very possible. We don't know. What would have happened? Let's say a foreign intelligence agency did want to, provoke Russia in this way. Well, what would happen, right? So right now, it's not entirely a war, especially not for Russia. It is kind of like a counterinsurgency movement because Russia's not conscripting their soldiers. It's not it's not their entire military might going against this. It is a large portion of their military might. Yes, and they're being, they're not doing too great. But it just comes at a very interesting time in which, foreign aid has stopped. The United States doesn't seem to want to pass any more money to Ukraine after sending them, $300 billion. They're running out of ammo in Ukraine. They've said they've got maybe a month left, couple weeks left of ammunitions. Their front line is collapsing. They just recently lowered the age of conscription to get more, military-aged men into the army. So there's a lot of problems going on with the war in Ukraine, especially on the Ukrainian side. So what would they want to do? Well, let's say Ukraine wanted Russia to increase its aggravation, right? Let's say they wanted Russia to be more aggressive. Why would Ukraine want that? Well, if Russia said, this act of terrorism was caused by Ukraine, it would cause an escalation of the war, likely leading to, a full-on invasion or a full-on declaration of war from Russia to Ukraine. That escalation would most certainly allow the media and the news sector to push even harder on this narrative, and especially Zelensky to push a lot harder on this narrative that Ukraine needs to be saved and is being, oppressed. So what would happen? Well, if Russia declares a full-on war with Ukraine, and as the United States and most Western nations are currently in a proxy war with, Ukraine and Russia, this full-on escalation would likely lead to more foreign aid going through. It would sweep through the House and it would sweep through the Senate in the United States to pass more money for Ukraine if there was a full-on escalation of war. Now, is that a motive for a foreign intelligence agency like the CIA or MI6 or, Mossad to do something like this? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. We don't know. But it's just very odd that you have all these things where the guys were paid, right? Then they shoot up and then they flee, which is not normally what ISIS does. ISIS-K fundamentalists, they like to blow themselves up. They don't like, to shoot and flee. It's not, blowing up, suicide bombing has been generally their MO. That's what they do. So, and then to have ISIS so far away, ISIS-K so far away in Russia, in Moscow, it's very odd. It's a very odd placement for why they would want to commit these terror attacks. Is it also possible that you had some, radical Muslims who were a little angry at the oppression that, the Orthodox Christian Russian, nation has been perpetrating? Also possible. We don't know. The facts have not been out. And anything that comes out of Russia, you do have to take with a grain of salt. So when they say it was Burisma, is it possible? It is entirely possible. Do we know? And I think leftist media will downplay this, most likely. But again, we don't know. Either side doesn't know. So that's essentially what we've gotten from the Moscow terror attack. And I just want to point out how quickly this blew over in the news. This was like a one-day news story and then, disappeared. 137 people were murdered. I just want to point that out, right? It's not like this was a little terror attack. This was one of the biggest in Moscow's history, recent history, whatever. So, is it foreign intelligence? maybe, probably, but we don't know. So that's the latest news out of Moscow. We'll talk about the war in another episode coming up. Next news story I've got is the Scott Key Bridge collapse. This thing is wild. That bridge collapsed like it was made of dough. That bridge collapsed so easily. Okay, there's a lot of conspiracy theories coming out of this, and these conspiracy theories, right? But is it possible? Just think for a minute. Is it possible that a foreign country, say China, say Russia, say whatever, right, would be able to do a cyber attack against a large ship, right? And then have it hit a quite critical piece of American infrastructure, and then have it so that nobody blames them. Is that entirely possible? 100% it's entirely possible. Is it also entirely possible that you have, an inexperienced crew made of, a lot of foreign workers? You've got outdated security. You've got a negligent company in terms of the companies that make the ships, right? You've got maybe aging infrastructure within the ships. And then is it also possible that it broke through? Yes, it's entirely possible. All these things are plausible. But to say that immediately this was not an act of terror, the FBI and the governor, they all came out saying there's no evidence of terrorism. It's very odd because it was quick. They didn't even do they did not do a large investigation, let's say, right? And then, cherry on top, who do you think's paying for the reconstruction of the bridge? It's not the insurance company. It's not the boat company. It's not the shipping company. No, it's the Fed. Why is the government taking control of this? This should entirely have been paid for from the insurance companies. If it's not an act of cyber terrorism, if it's not and if it was just clear negligence, why is it that the government's paying for this? Does the government just love shelling out money for, random causes? Of course they do. But why are they undertaking this development? It doesn't really make sense, and it seems quite odd. So what happened? This boat, this shipping cargo ship, called Dolly, is coming into the port, and all of a sudden the lights go out. Then what happens? It was very odd. It happened quite quickly, and somehow this was caught on perfect video by some streamer. So the lights go off, the power goes off. Then the power actually comes back on, and there starts to be a lot of black smoke coming out. The boat starts to turn, power goes out again, boom, hits it, bridge collapses. And it's not like it just got caught by surprise. The ship sent out a mayday signal to, the surrounding areas a couple minutes before this entire thing happened, and saying that, they had difficulties controlling the ship. And that's why, the only people who were on the bridge at the time, it wasn't like the bridge was full. Normally this is quite a full bridge, but the bridge wasn't that full. It's because they already blocked it off because they got a mayday signal. They stopped new cars from coming in. So there were 6 construction workers who were on the bridge as it collapsed. 3 of them have been recovered, and 3 are now presumed dead, either being crushed by the concrete or, drowning in the water. It's, it's another act. Is it from crumbling, infrastructure? I don't believe so. I don't believe, if you have a ship that's hitting, a pillar of a bridge at 12 million newtons or something, it's going to be a lot of damage. But, I want to keep going. It's so funny. And it's truly outrageous, I gotta say. When you've got Joe Biden going, and this is to get more sympathy or whatever he's doing, right? He's saying that he's visited and he's traveled over the Scott Key Bridge by train and by car several times from his way, from, Delaware or wherever. By car and by train over the Scott Key Bridge. Now, it's not like he insinuated something else and then people are misconstruing it. That's literally what he said. Now, let me ask you something. How many lanes of traffic do you think are on the bridge? And how many train lines do you think, how many rail lines do you think are on the bridge? Oh wait, there are no rail lines on the bridge. It's 4 lanes of traffic on the bridge. There's no train. There's no train. What is he talking about? This senile old man who's running the most powerful nation on the planet, trying to get, sympathy votes, trying to say, look at me, I've supported Baltimore for all this time, right? And then saying, I've traveled over this so many times. It's outrageous. Of course we understand it. Baltimore is he's got to get support from Baltimore. Why? Well, look at the demographics of Baltimore. And then look at the demographics of who are the new base of the Democratic Party. Again, I want to do an in-depth that coming up, but, it becomes increasingly harder for the Democrats and Joe Biden, right, to gain support from the middle. So they have to keep going more and more left. And how do you do that? Well, who's the most left-leaning people? Generally minorities. So find a place with a very large black presence and then have, say these things that a lot of these people will support. And maybe his voting numbers go up. Then he goes, we'll send $60 million to build new highways. The collapse of this bridge is quite important. The port that it blocks is one of the top 20 ports in the U.S. and one of the top 10 ports with dry bulk goods. This is quite a serious blow to the economy of, that city. And if it is found that this was a cyber attack, this would be a very big deal, because if you have foreign companies or foreign countries able to cause this much destruction from so far away so quickly, it's not good optics for the United States, and it's not good for the citizens of the United States. And, other countries, Canada should be worried, Europe should be worried, that these things can proliferate. What happens when all of a sudden every cargo ship that starts hitting every port starts running through it? What happens then? Right? But it is also very likely that this was negligence, that you've got, a boat filled with foreign workers who maybe aren't as experienced. And maybe, the boat was old. The stuff inside wasn't working. There was no backup generator. So, these two stories are quite serious, I will say. But there's nothing more serious than I think is, the Diddy story. What a downgrade, I've got to say. What a downgrade for, the whole pedophilic industry, right? The whole human trafficking industry. What a downgrade. We went from, or at least they went from, Jeffrey Epstein. He would fly you in on a nice private jet. He would bring you to his private island. And then, you'd have all these other famous people. You'd have Stephen Hawking there. He would bring intellectuals to the islands, right? He would bring them, and then they would, you know what goes on over there, right? But now you got this massive downgrade. Now you got Diddy, Sean P. Diddy Combs. This guy would bring, he would, drug you, whatever, bring you to a party, have you drink a lot, whatever. Then you get caught, you get compromised, you go have sex with, maybe a 16-year-old, and he's filming everything. He's just filming everything in his mansion in all the rooms, and then boom, he owns you, right? So what happened was Homeland Security, a couple weeks back, raided both of his houses, one in LA and one in Miami. And these were significant raids. It was like the whole SWAT team was in. Homeland Security went all out for this. As they were doing this, he was on a private jet. Everyone was kind of expecting him to flee the country. He didn't. Right now, apparently, he's just chilling in Miami as everything's happening. And as TMZ put it, he's just riding around on a bike around Miami as all these things are happening. He's seen in pictures. He doesn't seem that, distraught. And, why should he, right? All these Hollywood, all these celebrity types, from LA, it's the same MO. It's always the same thing. It's always, trafficking, drug trafficking, whatever, right? So essentially what he would do is he would find these young talents, and then he would throw these lavish parties at his mansions. He would get them drunk, he would get them, he would drug them, whatever. He would have them, and then at these parties, he'd have all these drugs, all these, these sex workers, whatever, all these girls, who were, a lot of the time, I don't even know it, sometimes they were, underage, but right now he's really being accused of sex trafficking, sex abuse, and rape, which, these seem like very similar things in what, but whatever. Some of the couple famous people at the party, Prince Harry was at one of the parties. Justin Bieber, who Diddy essentially made his career, or at least started off his career. And there was a lot of videos of Diddy and Justin, hanging out together. Or where, he would be giving an underage Justin Bieber alcohol and all these things. Now, did Diddy have sex with Justin Bieber? We don't know. We don't know, but you know, right? But this is how it works. This is how it works in these high-level places. There's elites. You want to join the club, you got to join the club, right? You want the money. You want the fame, right? So in order to join the club, what you got to do? Well, you kind of got to do this ritual. This ritual in which they'll let you in on all the secrets, they'll let you in on all the access, but they have to know that you won't turn on them, right? So how do they do that? How do they assure that no one will turn on them? Well, if you catch, a very famous person having, gay sex with, a 16-year-old, that would kind of shut them up, wouldn't you think? Or maybe if you filmed, someone doing cocaine or whatever it is, right? They would essentially have influence over you forever, and then you would never speak out against these people. This whole thing essentially came from, I believe his ex-wife or some ex-girlfriend or whatever, right? Who sued him, accused him that, he raped her, and then, a bunch of other things. But here's what's going on, right? Everyone in LA is doing this stuff. Every rich person in LA is essentially a prerequisite. If you're in LA and you're wealthy, you kind of have to do this. I'm kidding, but it's just a weird trend. It's just an odd, anomaly that so many of people in these communities who are wealthy, who live in these places, who have these types of jobs, also happen to be, pedophiles, gay rapists, whatever it is. But will Diddy get off scot-free? Probably. Here's the thing about the justice system. If you have money, you're good. You are good. Look what they got Epstein in, right? He was playing golf, he was playing tennis, he was in an open cell, minimum security, all these things, and he committed some of the most heinous crimes in history, right? Diddy probably did so, probably to, a lesser extent, right? It probably wasn't all minors, but, is it bad that you have influential people, blackmailing other people with, sex trafficking, all these things? Some woman accuses him of, in the lawsuit, going, that she was forced to traffic this pink cocaine, whatever it is, right? So it's all these things that keep you within, the group, the community, or whatever it is, so that, these people can retain power and essentially never, give up. And then in the case that they do get found guilty, or they do get arrested, there's no big sweat, because when you have enough money, you can hire the most lawyers, you can hire all these things, buy off, the legal justice system is not as incorruptible as it seems to the average, the average person, because you simply don't have the means to fight it. But when you've got a lot of money, you got a lot of influence, you're famous, you're powerful, like Diddy is, what seems to happen is a lot of your court, when you get arrested, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. What I think is going to happen, if it doesn't get dismissed or just, disappear, is if he does get arrested, I think he'll have to pay a fine. And then maybe like 18 months of house arrest. That's essentially what I see happening. I do not see him in prison for 20 years. People like Diddy don't go to prison for 20 years, 20, 40 years, right? He's no Sam Bankman-Fried. But, so that's what's going on with Diddy right now. There's not a lot of news, and the prosecutor's saying this is likely going to take several months to complete. So we'll wait, we'll see. And then ultimately, I support Diddy. I think he did nothing wrong. And I can't wait to see his new album, when he's free. I think, what he should do is like an O.J. Simpson type deal where, he comes out with the book saying I did it, or how I would do it, whatever, in big writing. And I think he should do a thing. He should maybe do a collab, R. Kelly Diddy. And it would be a great collab album. And I think, maybe get Harvey Weinstein in there, whatever it is. I think he needs to do a massive comeback, big spectacle. And that'll get people back on his side, back in his favor. Speaking of, pedophile sex trafficking, Nickelodeon. I think Diddy's secretly running Nickelodeon, because I think that's the only way this happened. But, so the Nickelodeon documentary, Quite on Set, came out on whatever HBO is calling themselves. I think Max it is. And it was a 3-episode plus a bonus episode, docu-series about all the bad things that happened to, child actors at Nickelodeon. And it mainly focused on Dan Schneider, who was kind of like, he was the Nickelodeon golden boy. He was responsible for all the shows. He was responsible for essentially everything at the Nickelodeon studios at the time. The only thing I found odd was they were placing so much of this blame on Dan Schneider, which, listen, this guy isn't, he isn't Mary Teresa. This guy isn't a great person. However, he didn't actually do any of the sex crimes. He was kind of creepy. He would get massages on set. He would say inappropriate jokes. He would be rude to the employees. He would, degrade women. And, he would propagate a culture. But, Dan Schneider, he didn't really do anything. Let's be honest. He didn't do anything. He then comes out on an interview after this documentary, like a 20-minute apology interview, which was, it's okay in terms of apology. Firstly, I gotta point out that I regret everything I did. Well, if you regret it, why'd you do it? You know what I mean? Like, I don't care, Dan Schneider, do whatever you want, but, so what actually happened? Well, there was like 4 or 5, these pedophiles, these people who got arrested on these sex crimes at relatively close periods of time and relatively near each other. But the show entirely rested upon one of the actors from Drake and Josh, Drake Bell, who's one of the most, he's a very famous character in the Nickelodeon shows. Drake and Josh was being an immensely popular show that ran for many seasons. And what happened was that a dialogue coach and someone who would work on set a guy named Brian Peck turned out to be this, gay pedophile who ended up sexually abusing Drake Bell for several years when Drake was 15, the guy being like 35, 40, right? And it's truly an outrageous, thing to let this happen. Because what he was able to do was essentially take control over Drake's life. He would drive him everywhere. He pushed out the family. And then it would always be him and Drake. And then, one night Drake wakes up in a hotel room and, he's being abused. And then this would go on for, years on end. And it's very, these people are not, mentally sane. But the craziest part, I think, besides, how bad, whatever. But the craziest thing, I gotta say, is how Brian Peck in his house would have, he had a clown painting on his wall. And then when asked about it, turns out this guy's pen paling John Wayne Gacy. And he's talking about all these things about John Wayne Gacy. For those who don't know, he was this guy who dressed up as a clown, would have, sex with, boys, and then murder them and put them under his house. Like, these guys were close. Did no one see this as a red flag? And, then there were several other Nickelodeon, employees who would then go to prison for being pedophiles, right? They all be accused of grooming these child actors. And again, it's definitely a culture, right? A culture where, make as much money, push these kids as much as possible, get the parents out, because the parents, they see these things, right? You see these creepos coming in, trying to have sex with their kids. Nickelodeon now going, whatever, they're going, well, now we protect our, those places in charge. There's never gonna be, child acting is such a, very interesting job, because you have to put in immense trust in the people who they work for, right? Because you can't always be there as a parent. You can't always be there for your kid. So you have to put your trust in all these people. And then, as it is, Hollywood, it's just, there's a lot of people who like little kids. That's all I'm going to say. So it's a truly outrageous story, but, now here's my solution, right? Because they're all going on animation, at least with animation, right? If you rape the kids, there's no video proof of it. That's all I'm saying. No, I'm kidding. This is it's a very serious crime, but yeah, it's truly outrageous that Nickelodeon would let this happen. And, they put all the blame on Dan Schneider, but then Dan Schneider goes out and says, well, all these other executives would have to read the scripts, costume designs, all these other things. So by putting all the blame on him, I don't think it's fair. I don't think using him as the scapegoat is necessarily fair to him. Not that, he needs protecting, but it seems like a whole culture. They made it seem like a very regional thing. But in reality, I believe it's likely the whole culture. And why is the logo a foot? Explain that one to me, Nickelodeon. Why did you have a foot as your logo for the longest time? Yeah, so that's Nickelodeon. So I think maybe Diddy and they start a new show on Nickelodeon. That's all I'm saying. You would make some good money. You drop your new album, get it up, get it on Nickelodeon, get people hyped up. My final story about, getting people hyped up is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announces his new vice president candidate. And the Democrats, the left, is losing their minds. Well, what happened? Well, he chooses this woman named Nicole Shanahan, who's the ex-wife of Google founder Sergey Brin. They divorced, allegedly because Sergey said that she slept with Elon Musk. They both both Elon Musk and Nicole Shanahan denying these allegations, but they did divorce. And while the settlement in the divorce is confidential, estimates have put that she received roughly, between $200 and $500 million after originally asking for $1 billion. She was a lawyer and now runs some nonprofit group about the environment or whatever, whatever white women do after they get divorced and have billions of dollars. Of course they start charities, right? So let's say she's not a Republican, we'll say that. She's quite left-leaning. She's both of them, both RFK Jr. and her, have been lifelong Democrats. However, as the Democratic Party pushes more and more to the left and to a more extreme, it essentially alienates a lot of the moderate base, right? You've got a lot of moderates who voted Democrat historically because, they hate Republicans, right? But as Joe Biden and the Democratic Party has pushed so far left, there's a large portion of the party now and a lot of left-leaning independents who are now seeing that maybe they don't want to vote for this ultra left-wing government that hasn't historically seen the values of the Democrat Party. Maybe they would want to vote for someone who's more center-left, as the independents called RFK Jr. and now Nicole Shanahan are. So this is a serious threat to, the Democrats, the left, because, right, they've become increasingly unpopular. They're increasingly focused on a very narrow, segment of, the base, minorities, people, all these things, who's essentially alienated such a large group of the Democratic Party. Another thing, and historically, by the way, the Democrats actually liked RFK for the last, year or whatever. They actually liked him running as an independent. Why? Well, they thought it was going to take votes away from Trump. They thought that a lot of, moderate Republicans and right-leaning independents, they would go to RFK. But now with Nicole Shanahan, RFK flipped the switch. Now he's the threat to the Democrats. And now he's a threat to democracy. Keep him off the ballot. That's one of the major issues that RFK has been having, is that he's not able to get on any state ballots. The only one he's been able to get in is Utah. And he's gone 8 other states where he says he has enough signatures to actually get on their ballots as well. But I find the weirdest thing is that he cannot seem to get Secret Service protection. He's asked several times to get Secret Service protection. Well, why does he need Secret Service? Yeah, maybe because his entire family was murdered by the CIA. Maybe that's why he wants Secret Service. Perhaps. And also, other presidential candidates have also gotten Secret Service just by asking for it. The fact that he won't get it, he's got to do a petition to get it, it's outrageous. But, RFK now is a threat to the Democrats, so he's a threat to democracy. So he needs to be shut down. According to Joe Biden, right, anyone who's not him is a threat to democracy. It's, this is not something what a tyrant would do, And, maybe the Democrats aren't that left-leaning. They entirely are, and they're seeing RFK as this, bigger threat to take away a lot of their votes. Well, and even so, current polling, Donald Trump is leading by several points and is leading in every swing state. And if you look at, Republican states and whatnot, he's just getting a stronger, hold on them. So they're hoping, are they going to cheat? Guys, they didn't cheat in 2020. Why would they cheat, So RFK is now seeing as taking away a bigger slice away from, Joe Biden. That's an issue for them. So they're going to try and do everything they can to get him off the ballots. Because, RFK Jr. is such a radical. He's a radical. He's from the center, right? His points are let's, stop spending so much. Let's, get more in shape. Maybe giving vaccines without, long-term research on it, maybe that's a bad idea. You radical, but that's just the rhetoric that they use. But anyways, I like RFK Jr. Is he a little too left for me? Yes. Is he what? If it was the choice between him and Trump, I would pick him any day. However, it's not. His current polling, maybe 10%. Maybe. That's if he can get on the ballots. So, is he going to win Utah? Let's say that's the only state. Probably not. I don't think he'll win anything. But it's good that he'll be there as a buffer to take away votes from Joe Biden. That's, And maybe if he gains enough popularity, maybe that'll open the door to having a third party in the United States and breaking the two-party system. Maybe like something we have in Canada, except for the fact that, the conservatives are going to dominate and the liberals have historically, liberals over the past 8 years haven't done too well. But, if you want an analogy to Canadian politics, the current Democrats are like the NDP. Unpopular, super far left. While, RFK independents would be more like, the liberals with a competent leader. And the Republicans you couldn't call conservatives because the conservatives in Canada are much far, like the entire Canadian scope is already shifted to an extreme far left. So there's no comparison in that case. But, RFK is probably the best option for president, I must say. However, you gotta support the conservative movement, and that's what we gotta push. So that's all I've got for today. That was a very big show. We'll catch you next time for when we discuss my trip to Haiti and everything else. Anyways, thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.